Hi there, my name is Meg Jones-Well and welcome to Devils and Digits. In today's introductory session, we are going to talk through the 9 digits of numerology and the ways that they connect us to the major arcana's first 9 archetypes. Our agenda for today is pretty simple. I'm going to tell you quickly about myself, offer a few brief summaries of the tarot and numerology, as well as talk through some reasons why we might want to use them together. Then we'll get into our lesson where we'll cover the major arcana archetypes 1 through 9. I'll also share some resources for further study, as well as give a big announcement that I'm really excited about for ways that you can work with me on tarot and numerology moving forward. First of all, my name is Meg Jones-Well, and if you have managed to find your way here and don't know who I am or follow my work, honestly, congratulations. Thrilled to have you. I run 3 AM Tarot, and I am a professional tarot reader and writer, as well as a still life photographer. I also, pre-pandemic, used to work a lot of events as an event production assistant and an events photographer. But over the last few years, I have been working as a columnist for tarot, both on Autostraddle and Astrology Answers. I am also the author of the forthcoming Finding the Fool tarot book, which is going to be coming out with Wiser Books, hopefully later this year, possibly at the beginning of next year. So just to give you a little bit of background on my tarot life, I bought my first deck in 2016, and I had not had a reading before. I hadn't even really held a deck before. My experience with tarot was very limited beyond just wanting to learn it. But after I bought my first deck and started working with it, I had a really hard time connecting with the cards. I found it really challenging trying to memorize all the meanings, and I was really overwhelmed whenever I would pull readings. I had a really hard time figuring out what the cards were trying to communicate and figuring out ways to make the connections and the interpretations feel personal. During that first year, I read an article that was talking about the numerology of the minors, specifically about how we can group together the aces, the twos, the threes, so on and so forth throughout the minors, and find connections between them that can help us both remember the meanings and also dig deeper into those meanings and finding the similarities. And when I read that and started applying that to my practice, it really changed everything for me. Being able to understand how the cards fit into the sequence, how they built on one another, as well as grouping them together in ways that made sense to me, just really helped things click into place and absolutely started to bring my tarot readings to the next level. And even now when I pull cards, as well as when I do writings, I always look at the numerology of my readings because I find it, without fail, adds additional depth and layers of meaning, as well as helping me trace the patterns within my readings beyond just the cards that are in front of me that day. They help me really connect the cards to past readings, as well as thinking about broader themes that are in my life, like for the entire year. And so when we're talking about what tarot is, let me move my little bubble up here. When we're talking about what tarot is, I want to first say this is not going to be a really extensive, exhaustive Tarot 101 lesson. This is just to make sure that we're all on the same page about how we define tarot as well as how we define numerology. So tarot is a 78-card deck that includes 22 major arcana cards, sometimes called archetypes, sometimes called trump cards, and 56 minor arcana cards. The minors are made up of 4 suits of 14 cards each and are each tied to one specific element. So when we're talking about the structure of the tarot cards, whether you use the Rider-Waite-Smith system, which is often what I use, or one of the other systems, all of them have the same numerological structure and sequential order. So no matter what kind of tarot deck you're using, the principles that I am going to share here and the information that I'm going to share here will be applicable for you in your studies. Tarot is a structured set of archetypes, figures, and experiences that help us learn about ourselves. And the tarot really captures major life events and transformational shifts, as well as the smaller everyday joys, frustrations, interactions, struggles, and victories that we experience every day as human beings. Tarot can be used in a lot of different ways, and so I like to describe it as a tool for intuitive wisdom, personal understanding, magic, creativity, and more. Personally, I use tarot more as a mirror than as a crystal ball, but because there are so many different ways to utilize these cards, it can be really useful to explore different correspondences and modalities that overlap with the tarot, and use different lenses to understand these cards in a variety of different ways. Okay. What is numerology? Again, this is not going to be a full Numerology 101 lesson, but just to get us all on the same page with how we're defining these terms. Numerology is a language of sacred numbers that understands each digit as possessing a unique and definable energy. So you can think of each digit as having their own personality, style, and purpose, as approaching challenges in their own unique ways, offering particular advice, wisdom, insights, and ideas. Every number is motivated by different goals and has a different approach to dealing with challenges, questions, concerns, and ideas. There are several different numerological systems. So I use Pythagorean numerology, which focuses on the digits 1 through 9. Numerology isn't quite as common these days as astrology, although I do think it's gaining popularity, particularly in occult circles. So you might not know anything about numerology, and that's completely fine. If you do, you might have heard of something called a life path number, which, if you're familiar with tarot, calculating your life path number is the same way that you calculate your birth card. So if you're familiar with your birth card, you're actually more familiar with numerology than you might realize. But just like astrology, numerology is a lot more complex than just pulling one number or just looking at one chart. It's a lot more complex than that. And so just as you are not just your sun sign in astrology, you are more than your life path number. These are both modalities that we can go very deep in and we can use to not only understand our own personality and way of moving through the world, but also look at broader events and like full lifetime sequences. Again, we're not going to talk about all of that in that session today, but just so you understand, numerology is a much larger modality than just working with tarot cards. Numerology is a way of identifying and understanding patterns, synchronicities, cycles, and connections. It can help us make meaning out of our experiences and also anchor ourselves in a certain part of the sequence or cycle, which is a really nice way of finding solid footing, even if it feels like we're getting trapped or swept up in something much larger than ourselves. And just like tarot, numerology can be used in a variety of ways, making it a wonderful tool for intuitive wisdom, personal understanding, magic, creativity, and more. Move myself over here. Okay. So there are a number of reasons that we might want to use these two modalities together, but the first is what I think is the most obvious. Tarot structure is already built around numbers. So unlike some of the other more complex modalities like astrology that we might use when researching and studying tarot, you don't have to learn a whole sequence of new correspondences. Just looking at the face of the card will show you what number it's assigned to and help you understand more about its energetic fingerprint. It can also give us, looking at the number, helps us to think about where in the sequence each card sits. So when we look at the major arcana archetypes through this numerological lens, it offers us a whole new set of meanings on the cards and helps us find different perspectives on these archetypes, which in turn helps us understand the lessons, wisdom, and insights that each one of these individual cards can provide for us. Additionally, in grouping the cards together by their numbers and looking at multiple cards that all fall within that same numbered category, we can identify new patterns and connections in the tarot, as well as consider the relationships that different cards have with each other. So every one of the 78 cards, not just the majors and not just the minors, can be consolidated or grouped into categories of one of these 9 digits. If you're looking at a card that has 2 digits, like anything that comes after the wheel, from the wheel to the world, we consolidate those 2 digits together. We add them up until we have a number that falls within 1 and 9. So if you think about, just to give you an example, if you're familiar with the tarot, you probably know that the High Priestess is the second archetype in the Fool's Journey. It's assigned the number 2. But Justice, card number 11, 1 plus 1, and Judgment, card number 20, 2 plus 0, both also fit into that grouping. So when we look at those 3 cards together, we can find energetic fingerprints that feel really similar. And we can tease out the identity and style and perspective and energy of the 2 in different ways within each of those archetypes. And that's just in the majors. We can also do that with the minors. Looking at all of the minor arcana 2s. And so looking at the 2 in general and then kind of breaking it apart and fractaling different aspects out, we can find different components of the 2 within all of those cards. Some similarities, some differences, but it gives us this whole new perspective on each of those cards and helps us find similarities that can give us deeper understanding and insights into each one of them. Lastly, if you're paying attention to the numbers in tarot, it's a really great tool for memorization, which is especially useful if you're just getting started with the tarot. And like I did in the beginning, we're really struggling with finding meanings and feeling personally connected to the cards. If you've been reading for a long time, it can help you deepen your understandings and relationships with individual cards, as well as helping you identify patterns within your readings, not just within one individual reading, but also in thinking about cards that you might pull for your entire year, or cards that you might pull for your month or week ahead. It can be a really great way to identify themes or energies or intentions, and help you trace backwards the cards that continue to show up for you in a different way than just looking for one individual, like, stalker card. There we go. That took a minute. So now we are going to jump into the lesson portion of our presentation. So before I get started, I just want to address a couple quick things. First of all, this is in no way going to be an exhaustive overview. We're just scratching the surface here. My aim with this presentation is to give you keywords for each of the 9 digits, as well as keywords for each archetype, as well as a theme that unites them together. And so with these tools, you should be able to take what I teach you here and carry it forward into your own readings. And so my intention is that you'll have lessons here that you can take directly into your readings from now on and get started with this technique. These are, what we're going to review today are the core archetypes that connect to each number. The archetypes 1 through 9, the Magician through the Hermit. But don't forget, as I mentioned before, that there are secondary archetypes for every number, as well as minor arcana archetype cards for each number. So every card in the grouping is going to express their energy of the digit in a different way. So if you hear me talking about one aspect of a number, like general themes and energies of a number, and you don't feel like it directly correlates to the core archetype that we're talking about today, that doesn't mean that you won't be able to trace that energy throughout other cards that fit within the grouping. So plus, keep an open mind. You might discover something about one of the archetypes in a way that you hadn't thought about it before, and it might really help to open up a new perspective on one of these archetypes that perhaps you hadn't considered. Lastly, we are not going to, just to address the elephant in the room, we are not going to be talking about the Fool or the number 0 today, because Pythagorean numerology, which I work with, focuses on the digits 1 through 9. So instead of getting caught up in the Fool being the first archetype of the Fool's journey, think about the Fool as the hero, the avatar. They are the person taking the journey. The Fool themselves is not a destination or a figure or a transformational shift that is part of the journey. They are the one taking it. So if the Fool is the person driving the car, for example, the Fool is the desire, the Fool is the energy that starts us off the precipice of the cliff and into the journey itself, the Magician is the first archetype that they meet on their journey, which is why the Fool has the energy of 0 and the Magician has the energy of 1. So we're going to jump right in. The number 1 is associated with ideas of innovation and independence. So if we think about this as a person, this is someone that we might describe as a visionary, someone who blazes trails and leads and initiates. So 1 is really about standing apart, finding possibility in everything. This is someone that's really eager to make a unique mark in the world. 1 is very firm in their identity, loves their uniqueness, is not afraid to stand up, stand apart, stand out. They also really believe that 1 has something really powerful and special to offer to the world. 1 sets things in motion and often really gathers and rallies others to their cause as well. So 1 feels a really deep call to put original ideas forth and to share them with other people. 1 is not afraid to take the microphone, to take the stage, to really rally people around a certain cause, goal, or kind of initiation, activation energy. 1 is also connected to originality and free will. So 1 is definitely not afraid to be distinctive. And when we look at the first archetype that the Fool meets on their journey, we come to the Magician, which is a figure that is associated with confidence, gathering resources, anticipation, pragmatism, manifestation, and ideas. So with the Magician, we often really explore this belief that our dreams can absolutely come true, that we have what it takes to change the world, and that the goal, the desire that the Fool brings is not only important, but also necessary. With the Magician, we feel this energy building. It's about ideas popping up effortlessly, this real sense of momentum and anticipation that brightens everything and makes every goal we have seem not only possible, but probable. The Magician has a real energy of bringing new concepts or visions to the forefront. So they look at this desire that the Fool has brought and see potential and possibilities in everything. If you're familiar with improv or role playing, I like to think of the magician as yes and energy. Whatever questions the fool brings, whatever ideas or dreams or desires or questions the fool might have, the magician says, yes, let's go. Here's a million ideas. Here's throwing open every door, pointing out every pathway, pulling out every roadmap. The magician has ideas and resources to spare. This is no limits on dreams, no boundaries or restrictions or hesitations. The magician is all about brainstorming, getting excited, and celebrating everything that we're about to do. So again, the magician is all about solutions to the fool's questions and hesitations. The magician is a really empowering energy, and brings this desire to make things real. The magician wants all of our dreams to become realities. And so when we're talking about the one and the magician together, what unites these two is this idea of the spark, right? This is activation energy, initiation energy. It pushes us to own what we want and to believe in ourselves, as well as to keep moving forward. So with one, this is a real trust that the idea that we have is a good one, and knowing and believing that we are the right person to achieve this goal. Really like sitting in our unique vision and knowing that we have the courage and the confidence and the brilliance and the resources and the talent to make that dream a reality. So think about like lighting a match or starting the ignition, getting everything ready to move forward, and also knowing that anything is possible. So after this big, exciting idea with the magician and the one, two is more closely associated with partnerships and relationships, as well as with ideas of duality. So with the number 2, we're looking specifically at themes of diplomacy, peacemaking, authenticity, balance, and reflection. This is a digit that's a lot about seeing multiple perspectives, being open to new ideas and new opinions, as well as being vulnerable with our desires and our longings. 2 really wants us to be authentic in ourselves and also to let others start to see who we are. So it's about balancing compromise with an awareness of self. 2 is also associated with paying attention to input and output. So it's when we talk about authenticity and knowing the self fully, 2 wants us to think through where we've been and where we're going, to honor multiple aspects of self. And the energy of 2 is really calm and focused. It's often about listening and processing, as well as the union and blending of opposites. So when we translate that energy over to the major arcana, we meet the priestess. This is a figure that's associated with intuition, mystery, observation, choice, caretaking, and awareness. So we tend to think about the priestess as knowing the self, listening to the self, trusting the self. It's all about recognizing who we are and what we want, while still holding space for internal mysteries and being open to new personal discoveries. The priestess is also about paying attention to the options that are before us, narrowing down our possibilities, and choosing a way forward that feels right. So if you think about like times that we step back and give ourselves chances to really reflect and process, we almost always in that process discover and clarify things, both about ourselves and about what we want. It's in thinking about the ways that we pay attention to other people, especially when it comes to romantic and working relationships. The priestess wants us to know ourselves so that then we can extend that energy back outwards and demand what we want, or take what we want, or find what we want. When we talk about the priestess, we tend to talk about this as a solitary figure, right? A lot of imagery of the priestess is this figure sitting alone or guarding a temple or staring up at the moon or sitting by the water. We tend to think of them as someone that's sort of removed or guarding, the shadow veil. We talk about the shadows a lot with the priestess. So I think that's a particularly interesting element when it comes to the 2 in these ideas of partnership and duality. But if you think about the priestess as having a lot to teach us about when we allow both the conscious and the subconscious to be an important element in the ways that we make meaning and the ways that we make decisions. I think that kind of brings in that 2 energy in a really beautiful way. The priestess is about balancing what we know with what we don't know and making space for our intuition and our gut, as well as our perceptions and our mind. So the priestess in that way is kind of a partnership with the self, recognizing the value in different facets of ourselves and trying to be true to all of those individual pieces. So what unites the 2 and the priestess is this idea of a crossroads. This is an opportunity to be selective about what we're going to invest our time, energy, magic, and intention in. When we use observation and authenticity to decide our next steps, it helps us to be true to ourselves and to be able to prioritize what matters. These 2 are really about finding internal balance, but they're also about the ways that we cross paths with other people. When we talk about crossroads, we often talk about making a choice, picking between the fork and the road, which way we're going to go. But crossroads can also be about the ways that we interact with people that we care about, with friends and family and loved ones. And the ways that our most authentic relationships can help us learn more about who we are and what we want. It's also about understanding who we are in relation to those who know us best, and seeing the ways that our actions and choices reflect back to us our values and what really matters to us. So after this number of self and this number of partnership and duality, 3 is a number that's associated with expression, communication, inspiration, empathy, sensitivity, and enthusiasm. So 3 is a very expressive, high energy, open sharing, kind of expansive energy. It's really about letting our thoughts and our dreams and ideas come out through creativity, speech, movement, change, or anything else. 3 is very attentive to what feels good and what does good, and noting how others receive our offerings. 3 is really tied to seeing how it feels to share a new piece of ourselves with our community, as well as finding and building our community. 3 is also really deeply tied to the collective in terms of like sensitivity to the needs of others, and wanting to express truth, ideas, and desires in ways that build and support new connections, and as well as deepening existing ones. 3 also introduces this idea of broadening our scope. We're starting to look outside of ourselves and our goals and consider how others see us, as well as how they might process and understand what we have to offer. So 3 at its core is really motivated by wanting to be seen, recognized, appreciated, and understood. This number is a true desire for connection and collaboration. And our third major arcana archetype is the Empress, which is associated with hope, abundance, generosity, community, luxury, and nourishment. So when we talk about the Empress, we often talk about this outpouring of creative, generative, connective energy, as well as these ideas of abundance and joy. The Empress is really an archetype that believes that what we're making and doing has inherent value, and is really deeply tied to seeing potential ahead based on what we are doing in the present. The Empress has a lot to share and a lot to give, and also is able to both give and receive with joy. The Empress is really tied to this idea of feeling bounty in ideas and emotions, as well as in community. The exchange of ideas and letting other people see us can bring new inspiration, and can also help to amplify the resources that we already have. So this is about strengthening our individual work and also helping us to find our place within the collective. The Empress also, lastly, is about physical pleasure and satisfaction in what we're doing. So it's about really this receiving and offering of joy and abundance, as well as enjoying sensory and sensual experiences, celebrating being human, honoring beauty and art, being really fed, nurtured, and nourished by what we are building and what we are doing. So what unites the 3 and the Empress is the energy of creation. This is about letting ourselves take up space in the physical world, as well as speaking and expressing new things into existence. We're building on the intention and the choice of the first 2 numbers in the sequence and creating something tangible that can stand on its own. 3 and the Empress are also really about letting ourselves be seen through this new lens of what we have made. Letting this facet of ourselves help to offer more information about who we are and what we want. And when we create something new that people can interact with separate from us, it also invites others to then engage with our creation and in turn back with us. So in sharing what we love outwards and going beyond partnership to community and collective, we start to play with these ideas of interplay and reciprocity. So when we come to the 4, we start to introduce ideas of tradition, foundations, systems, security, focus, and practicality. So after this really rich outpouring of expression, 4 wants to start creating a solid base that supports our future growth and change, as well as clarifying our methods of creation. So 4 is really about organizing what we're doing into systems that can be replicated and refined. 4 is all about building traditions for ourselves that help us really sink into a rhythm and focus on the work itself. 4 is also tied to protection, both for the thing that we are building, but also the people and communities that are helping us and supporting us. 4 is a very practical number. Aside from practicality, there's also a willingness to acknowledge not only the limits that we set around our work, but also the limits that we have as human beings. we are making something as good as it can be, but 4 still is able to be realistic about what we can accomplish. It doesn't want to rush or push too hard. 4 is not going to let ourselves get burned out. So 4 is really tied to building and establishing, to details, to systems, and to roots. 4 is a very methodical and careful approach to growth. And in the same way, the Emperor, our archetype of the major arcana that is assigned to number 4, is tied to ideas of structure, leadership, limitations, discipline, protection, and resilience. For me, this is one of the clearest parallels of the number 4 and the Emperor to that core archetype, because the Emperor is so much about connecting dots, getting organized, putting pieces of our own work and ideas together, and also really taking charge of our future, right? The Emperor helps us to build a timeline for ourselves and to, assign tasks, to delegate. It's all about having discipline and making a schedule that we can really stick to. The Emperor is all about putting guards in place that really allow creativity and inspiration to continue blossoming. This isn't about restricting what's happening. It's instead about creating systems that support what is happening. The Emperor also really does understand resilience and knows that ups and downs are going to be part of the process. But instead of just planning to adapt and hoping that it all works out, the Emperor instead is thinking ahead about everything that they might need and ensuring that everything is already built to protect and to ensure that work can keep happening even if the unexpected does happen. So the Emperor takes the ideas and the insights of the previous archetypes and figures out what matters, really devoting themselves to making sure that our biggest ambitions are able to become realities. So when we look at these two together, what unites the 4 and the Emperor is this idea of control. So this is taking ownership, putting systems and organizing principles into place, recognizing vulnerabilities or limits, establishing safety and security so that building can continue, as well as weathering storms and creating solid foundations that can withstand any obstacles or challenges that may arise. So there's a real belief in what we're doing, but it's manifesting in a different way with the Emperor. This is about focusing and protecting that energy. It's about investing in our own future, which includes the structures that maintain that future. So 4 and the Emperor are about leadership and composure. It's very much taking charge, keeping a cool head, as well as recognizing the value in what we're doing and making a plan to ensure that our dreams have longevity and legacy. So when we get to 5, we have reached the midpoint of the sequence in 1 through 9. So with 5, we can think of it as a pivot point that is going to move us from the beginning to the back half of this cycle. So the number 5 is associated with liberation, adjustments, disruptions, and is dynamic and bold. This is a number that embraces change instead of trying to fear or deny it. So 5 is really a number about pushing past any limiting beliefs. It's about being willing to look beyond our own experience and previous knowledge, disrupting the status quo, and freeing ourselves from any constraints that are limiting our growth. So 5 is an opportunity to make shifts. It's really about separating the bright beginning and all the optimism and joy from the tangible realities of reaching that success and coming to an ending in the cycle. So 5 is about challenging rules or traditions, and in that way, it's about not really being afraid to be unique. 5 initiates transformations, and is also about acknowledging both what works and what doesn't. 5 isn't afraid to push through discomfort and is able to really adapt and learn, making big choices or moves and kind of seeing what's going to happen on the other side. With the major arcana, we find the Hierophant as the 5th archetype, which is generally associated with spiritual discovery, scholarship, rituals, wisdom, collective knowledge, and history. So for a lot of people, we think of the Hierophant as a keeper of knowledge, but I tend to think of this figure as more of a mentor or a teacher, someone who's not a gatekeeper of knowledge, but rather someone that's actively encouraging us to research, question, and challenge what already exists. So with the Hierophant, we're looking really deeply into our own traditions and beliefs. We're unpacking the ways that spiritual and physical worlds intersect and overlap, kind of having a foot in both worlds. And also about recognizing what matters to us. So with the Hierophant, we adopt existing rituals and also create new ones. It's about figuring out what really resonates with us, what we understand truth to be. So with the Hierophant, we have this energy of interrogation and discovery. It's about recognizing what is known and what is unknown, learning from those that have more experience or access, but also respecting our own experience and our own wisdom. So with the Hierophant, we're starting to try to find our place in the world. We have developed our own systems for our own goals, but this is about kind of stepping back and looking at the broader systems within the world that we're operating in, as well as assessing which ones really function for us and which ones might need to be rebuilt. So when we look at these two together, what unites the 5 and the Hierophant is this idea of the change. So this is not being afraid to disrupt and explore. It's driven by really craving understanding and expression and experience, always wanting to learn more, but also being comfortable with the adjustments that in taking in that truth is going to naturally bring about. So this is kind of knowing that the only way out is through, and in learning as much as possible, we can understand more about who we are and what we believe, as well as what we need to feel empowered and safe and surviving. So this is all about asking questions, gathering information, and learning to see the world through different lenses. So again, really unpacking and understanding our idea of truth. So now when we reach 6, we have moved into the second half of the sequence. And with 6, this is a number that is associated with nurturing, devotion, community, responsibility, nostalgia, and compassion. So with 6, we're slowing down a little bit and starting to put all of those new ideas and answers into action. And in this point now, we're starting to trust ourselves to be our own guide. So rather than protecting the work and our individual idea, as well as like moving past boundaries that may already exist, we're now starting to move out into daily efforts that we can make towards building new ties and new relationships. 6 is about learning to the specific function that we serve within our relationships and our communities, as well as understanding the broader dynamics of being in relationship with people and being in community with people. So 6 is really tied to being trustworthy and stable, to letting ourselves be interwoven with people-centered systems, letting other people depend on us, and also be allowing ourselves to depend on others. So with 6, we find these real rhythms of reciprocity, as well as starting to understand the ripple effect that our actions have on the world, which is where we get those ideas of like duty and responsibility with the 6. So much of the 6's energy is also about honoring who we have been, recognizing and celebrating our present growth, as well as paying attention to who we're becoming. So there's often this nostalgia flavor to the number 6 and thinking about where we started, where we've come from, what has shaped us, and how those like early experiences are like manifesting in a really tangible way in our present. So 6 often encourages us to recognize the cycle that we are in and to take joy in the present. But there's also this idea of showing compassion for our younger selves, and for any mistakes that we might have made in the past. When we're able to find that compassion for ourselves, it makes it a lot easier for us to have compassion for other people, which again feeds back into that community, nurturing, devoted energy. And when we translate that 6 energy over to the major arcana, we find the Lovers, which is a card that's associated with freedom, choice, self-discovery, harmony, fulfillment, and celebration. So the Lovers is often tied to romantic relationships and marriage, partially based on the name, partially based on the Rider-Waite-Smith drawings. But I think at its heart, the Lovers is actually an archetype that's about choice. And it's so often about choosing ourselves, as well as choosing authenticity and choosing what we want our lives to be and who we want to share that life with. So I see this as really moving beyond old boundaries and traditions, making our own rules and letting our desires guide our choices rather than always deferring to the rules of the world that we live in or old boundaries, old sets of rules. So with the Lovers, we're really making decisions for ourselves, finding our partners and our chosen family, and also letting those people help us expand our views of ourselves and who we can be. So there's a lot of like love and pride and fulfillment in this card, which leads us to this natural sense of celebration, how far we've come, how far we've grown, and the power that comes with being free to make our own choices and see where that leads us. So with the Lovers, we know who we are and are really taking ownership of the life that we want to lead in a way that feels new and exciting than everything that's come before. There's also a sense of safety with the Lovers. I see that as knowing that our needs have been fulfilled and are being fulfilled, which gives us the safety to experiment and play, feeling content and finding a real satisfaction within that process of playing, experimenting, and seeing what happens. So when we look at 6 and the Lovers together, we find this uniting theme of expansion, looking beyond what we have always known, as well as what we have been taught, taking responsibility for our desires and our choices, as well as finding people that love and support us, which in turn helps us learn to love ourselves in new ways. 6 in the Lovers is so much about finding balance between who we have been and who we are becoming. As well as now that we've learned what the rules are, we can decide which ones we want to break, and can really listen to that sense of internal authenticity, discovery, experimentation, and freedom seeking. There's a kind of an adventurous spirit to the number 6, but in a way that's safe and nurturing, caring for ourselves, caring for that inner child and our most authentic desires and fears and vulnerabilities. With 6 in the Lovers, we are really consciously choosing ourselves in this present version as who we are, and letting our desires guide all of the other choices that we might make to come. So now we're moving into number 7, which is the number connected with problem solving, analysis, searching, questioning, spirituality, and solitude. So with 7, we are tackling any new points of friction that may have come about from the adventures and choices that we made with the 6. So we're coming up with creative solutions to challenges, but we're also not afraid to get into the thick of our biggest obstacles and uncertainties. 7 brings a real energy of interrogation, discovery, really picking things apart and looking at them from every angle. So 7 really wants to gather as much information and resources as possible, while also digging into what things actually mean. So 7 is a really spiritual energy. It's going beyond the surface and really thinking about the motivation and the inherent meaning behind the things that we're doing. 7 has a lot of space for mystery, and is a really seeking, questioning, curious energy, really wanting to find the bigger meanings in our actions and our desires. What is driving us? What is inspiring us? What is holding us back? 7 is also inherently, because of all this questioning and seeking and looking for authenticity, 7 is inherently kind of a number that's associated with solitude, because there's so much about listening to the self, not being afraid to act alone, trusting the self, knowing the self, and being able to really listen to what resonates with us instead of deferring to community or partners or rules. And when we translate that over to the major arcana, we find the archetype of the Chariot, which is the 7th archetype and is associated with forceful pursuit, setting goals, reconciliation, overcoming obstacles, hard work, and consideration. The Chariot is a lot about clarifying what we want, even if the process of that clarification is difficult. It's about recognizing where we want to go and keeping our eyes on the prize so that we can reach that big milestone, that big goal, conquer that big, achievement, milestone. How many times can I say milestone? But the Chariot is also about integrating what we've learned with what we are still learning. I like to think about the Chariot as starting to experiment with pushing past some of the boundaries that maybe we've been carrying forward from the 4 and the 5, right? It's starting to feel brave enough to make adjustments to those existing boundaries or even break through them so that we can really put our effort into achieving our biggest ambitions, into trying to do it in a way that feels safe for other people. So the Chariot is a lot about paying attention to our actions. And we see here with the Chariot this kind of thinking about the consequences of what we do and believe, as well as finding the broader meanings behind what we're doing or what we're seeking. Why are we reaching for this goal? What is it going to mean when we actually cross that finish line? So when we look at 7 and the Chariot together, what unites these two things is this idea of the quest, pursuing something that we know is important, finding deeper meaning within that pursuit, as well as knowing ourselves, letting our deepest desires manifest into a real plan for confident action. It's about striving for understanding and awareness in everything that we're doing, and being willing to break through the other side, if necessary, to push through those boundaries or old rules. In the process of clarifying our desires, it might mean that we have to stand alone, that we might have to go our own way, and that can be a really beautiful and empowering thing. So if we think about the 6 as this idea of self-discovery that leads to exploration, as those goals and desires become more clear, the 7 is really starting to take the skills that we've learned and beginning to push through into more new and unexpected places with more of a drive. Rather than this kind of wandering energy that we can find with the Lovers and the 6, the 7 is starting to get a lot more focused about what we want and where we want to go. So after this spirituality and this seeking and this clarifying, we come to 8, which is a number that is all about dedication, empowerment, ambition, hard work, mastery, and security. So if we think about the 7 and the Chariot really as pushing forward, the 8 is like really slamming on the gas. So this is a number of absolute focus to the task at hand, fully stepping into our power, commanding a situation, knowing our worth, and devoting ourselves to a cause or an idea or a goal with everything that we have. So 8 is about doing what it takes to achieve our dream, knowing that all that we're really capable of and putting in daily consistent effort to make something happen. 8 isn't really associated as much with taking unnecessary risks or big chances, but instead is about taking structure and organization and really using those tools to press forward. This is like safe and steady growth, moving with control and poise, and believing that success is within our grasp. So 8 is very tactical and organized, extremely efficient energy. And there are a lot of similarities to our 8th major arcana archetype of strength, because this is all about themes of patience and purpose, self-confidence, as well as careful attention to timing. Strength is also associated with perception and leadership. So when we think about strength, we often think about wisdom, right? This is paying attention to trusting in our own experience and our knowledge and our intuition. It's about having really clear intentions, as well as knowing our place in the world. And strength is often associated with not rushing the process or letting other people rush us to make a decision, to take action, to make a choice. Strength recognizes the inherent power that comes with experience, and also isn't afraid to wait for the right moment to choose, to speak, or to act. Strength understands toughness and is very tough, but it's in a way that's subtle and quiet rather than in your face. This isn't the kind of strength that's flashy or showing off. It's a strength that is true and runs very deep. This card is also about recognizing the impact of our choices and our movements. It's seeing what others are doing while continuing to do our own thing. Strength for me is really tied to owning authority, and also being aware of our influence, having this really commanding presence, and not being afraid to take up space, call the shots, make big decisions. So when we look at 8 and strength together, what unites these two is the power. Not hesitating to use our skills, taking charge of the narrative and of our own success, paying attention to timing, letting our ambitions drive us forward, and understanding what true power looks like, as well as stepping into that power, right? With 8 and strength, we're not afraid to let our impact be felt. Now that our goals have really been clarified, we are pursuing them with single-minded focus and putting all of our energy and passion and power into getting shit done. All right, our final number in the sequence is number 9, which is associated with philanthropy, service, expansion, perspective, integration, and regeneration. So 9 has big humanitarian energy, and is all about caring for other people, creating systems of aid for other people, and making the world a better place, both for us as well as any future generations to come. So 9, in many ways, is about growing beyond ourselves and knowing the impact that we have, really feeling it in a big way. With 9, we see how we fit into the world, and gain a better understanding of what needs to be done in order to promote healing, community, growth, and transformation. So with 9, we're really paying attention to the collective and putting big goals over small victories. It's about being really forward thinking in a much larger way than beyond just the individual, our own desires or our own needs. 9 is also really about integrating all of the lessons and experiences that we've had in all of the numbers that have come beforehand. 9 wants us to process those internally while letting them inform our external actions. So 9 is really about putting all the pieces together and being able to create a whole new world from the experiences and wisdom that we've gained through everything that's happened before. So to that end, with the number 9, we find a lot of themes of regeneration, because now we are prioritizing healing, recovery, growth, transformation, change, and also we're thinking about rebuilding the things that have been broken along the way, any structures we've broken through, boundaries that we've broken through, limits that we've readjusted. This is thinking about, again, both internally and externally, what kinds of changes we can make that are going to improve things when we come to this next new beginning. And when we look at the major arcana and the hermit, we find these ideas of self-examination, solitude, studying past experience, reflection, interrogation, and authenticity. I really love this pairing of the 9 and the hermit because I think it's kind of one of our more challenging ones, right? With 9, we're talking about expansion and philanthropy and thinking about other people. But when we talk about the hermit, we're usually thinking about someone that steps outside of daily routines to focus on themselves, to consider their own internal landscape. But I think this pairing really encourages us to remember that the hermit also holds a lot of wisdom and experience. The hermit is often seen as someone that knows how to navigate difficult situations, and is able to lift that lantern and really illuminate the path forward in a way that other people can also see and follow. So with the Hermit, it's about taking time to process thoughts and feelings before acting and keeping all of those layers and experiences in mind. When the Hermit comes, we are often called to give ourselves the space that we need to process and understand something fully, which in turn, just like with the High Priestess, when we spend time reflecting, it makes us more compassionate and conscientious. The Hermit isn't just hiding from the world. The Hermit isn't just denying everything that's happened and sinking into themselves. Instead, the Hermit is a card of really active and intentional self-interrogation, asking ourselves all of the hard questions so that our answers can inform our actions and help us act in a way that's really intentional and much more broadly useful to the world. In thinking about where we have been and the ways that we have changed along the way, we can be really authentic and can act then in ways that are fueled by reflection and perspective, rather than by making assumptions or hoping that some idea that we have is going to actually make a difference. So to put it another way, as we get closer to our end goal, we consider how that goal is going to impact the world and how we are being shaped and shaping the world by our own journey. So with the Hermit, we're examining not only our own transformations, but also how the things that we are doing are transforming the world around us. And with that in mind, when we talk about the 9 and the Hermit, what unites these two things is this concept of the wisdom, recognizing how we function both in and out of society, bringing experience and understanding to the table, as well as inviting others to learn from what we know. With 9 and the Hermit, we are integrating lessons from our past, as well as creating and finding the meaning in everything that we're doing. So with 9 and the Hermit, we are recognizing the impact that we have on the world and on the ways that our ambitions and ideas also transform us in the process. So we find these themes of spiritual awakening, something ending and something else getting ready to begin. And there's kind of a detachment with both the 9 and the Hermit, and being able to look at things with clarity and harness wisdom in a way that's really devoted to being effective instead of just holding wisdom back for the self. So that was our quick and dirty introduction to the numerology of the major arcana, and I really hope you found it useful. If you're interested in exploring numerology in more depth, these are a few of the books that I found the most useful, as well as some numerologists that you might want to check out. These are their Instagram handles, so you can follow them. Unfortunately, a lot of the numerology books that I have found and researched, especially when putting my book together, are pretty traditional, and they lean really heavily on the masc femme binaries. But someone that I particularly want to highlight is Rebecca Skolnick. She's the first Instagram handle on this list here. She's a queer numerologist based in New York. I've gotten a couple readings with her, and she's kick-ass and brilliant. And her book is coming out later this year. So I would definitely encourage you to follow her and also pre-order her book, because pre-orders are super important. So I will show these resources again, so don't feel the need to scroll them down right away. I want to make my big announcement first. So I'll move over to the next slide here. Where to put my little bubble. Okay. If you enjoyed this session and you're ready to learn more about how to utilize numerology and sequences, patterns, as well as groupings of numbers in the tarot, then I hope you're as excited as I am about my new class. I'll tuck myself, how about here? That's fun. Okay, I am launching a 6-week tarot numerology course entitled Devils and Digits. I'm sure that will come as a huge shock to you with this brand new name. I've been putting this class together for over a year, assembling materials and doing research, and I'm really, really looking forward to sharing everything that I've discovered with you and helping you learn how to implement these tools into tarot in a way that feels really practical, really organized, and just intensely useful. So, this course will focus on an in-depth analysis of the digits 1 through 9 through the lens of tarot. Like I said, today was just a very quick introduction, but with this class, we're going to have a couple of lessons every week that will spend much more time going into both these core archetypes, as well as the secondary archetypes and the minor arcana cards that all fit into these groupings. I will also share my methodology for working with court cards, and so that you can understand all the different ways that we can work with those groupings together and find different elements of each of the digits throughout the tarot. I will also show some other methods for grouping tarot cards together. There's more than just grouping them into individual digits. There are also numbers that are tied to manifestation and creation and intellect. And so I will share the different ways that we can do that as well, which just give you even more methods for tracing patterns within your readings. Lastly, this course will also include a lot of guidance for how to include numerology in your tarot readings. And you can use these for when you're slinging cards, both for yourself or for friends or for clients if you're a professional. But this is also offers some really cool ways to utilize the cards if you're going to meditate with a card on its own or do spell work with a card on its own. In stepping into certain energy or trying to harness it and challenge it in specific ways, numerology can be a really useful tool in doing that. So the way that this course will function, it's going to be all pre-recorded videos, just like this one. So there'll be a little bubble with my little face as well as slides, and we'll go through those lessons. Every lesson will include at least 4 videos, and we'll do 2 lessons each week, at least. Some of the weeks we're going to have 3 lessons. So you'll have a ton of videos. They'll go between 5 and 30 minutes, most likely. I'm still in the process of recording them. But those will be pre-recorded, and you can download them and watch them on your own time. They'll be released once a week. Every lesson will also have a series of worksheets and exercises, as well as tarot spreads that you can use for personal exploration so that you can journal through, record your own insights and ideas, as well as ask any questions that you need to, and those are materials that you can save for yourself. There will also be an online community component. This is just a place for you to talk to other students in the class, as well as ask your questions to me. You can share as much or as little as you like. It's not mandatory to be part of the online community, but I wanted there to be a space for people to share their findings, their spreads, their readings, their questions, as well as their insights. I'll also hold weekly office hours there, and it will be done so in a way so that even if you can't attend the weekly office hours, you'll still be able to read and catch up on everything that was missing. I'm sure you noticed that this course does have closed captions enabled. The software that I'm using also allows for downloadable transcripts. So every video, including this free lesson, you will also have a downloadable transcript so that you can use that for just easier search functionality. Lastly, the videos, because they're pre-recorded, and the worksheets and exercises, spreads, and transcripts are all downloadable, which will give you lifetime access. So if for any reason you get partway through the course and fall behind, if emergencies happen, we are still in a goddamn pandemic. This gives you a lot of flexibility. There's no online component of a time that you have to be available every week. You can really do things at your leisure. Even if you don't finish everything within the 6 weeks, you'll have everything at your fingertips to come back to whenever you're ready. Once again, my bubble is in the wrong place. Okay, so I am offering early bird pricing for this first week of sales. The class is going to start on Saturday, April 30th. The new moon, eclipse, it's all going to be fine. It's going to be great. So if you know that you're interested in the class, I highly recommend heading to 3amtarot.com/courses. There'll be a lot more information on the finer details of the class, as well as the 6-week kind of agenda, so you can see what we're going to be working on each week in the schedule, as well as all of the pricing information. So if you know that you want to sign up for the class, definitely sign up now before the price goes up. I anticipate holding this class again in the future, but I imagine that every time I hold it, I will be generating new materials and using student feedback to make the course even better and more in-depth. So this is probably the cheapest that this class is ever going to be. So again, highly recommend heading to 3amtarot.com/courses to learn more and to snag your spot. I just want to say a huge thank you for being here. This is my first class doing in this format. I'm not always someone that likes to show my face or share my voice. I'm trying to be better about that. So I'm really deeply grateful that you're here, that you're supporting my work, and I hope this lesson was incredibly informative to you, and that you found some pieces that you'll be able to apply in your own tarot practice. I feel free to head to 3amtarot.com/courses for the replay. It should be up right now. And thank you again for being here. So if you are here for the live session, please stay, hang out. I'm going to be doing a live Q&A, both on the class that I'm offering, but also on tarot and numerology in general. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. And if you're watching this on replay, make sure you're following me at 3am.tarot on Instagram. I will be doing, for both live and recorded viewers, I will be doing Q&As in my stories on both the class, tarot, and numerology over the next few weeks. So if you have questions, if you want to know more about the class, or you just are trying to figure out, how the devil and six work together, feel free to drop into my stories. I would love to talk to you more about what we've talked about today and my work with tarot and numerology. So thank you again for being here, and I look forward to connecting with you.